There is a side of you, a version of yourself that you have spent your entire life running from, not because it is weak, but because it is powerful, too powerful. Carl Jung called it the shadow, and most people will die without ever meeting it. But the terrifying part is this: the shadow does not disappear simply because you ignore it. It waits, in silence, in darkness, growing stronger behind your smile, behind your politeness, behind the version of yourself you show to the world. And one day, when life finally breaks you, it comes out, suddenly, violently, uncontrollably. That is why Jung once warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Most people believe they know themselves. They do not. They know only the mask, the performance, the civilized character they created so others would accept them. But beneath that mask, there is rage, envy, greed, fear, cruelty, violence, forbidden desires. And the more you deny these emotions, the darker they become. Because buried emotions do not die, they transform into anxiety, into self-hatred, into depression, into silent resentment, into emotional numbness. This is why some people suddenly explode over small things. It was never about the small thing. It was years of buried darkness searching for a crack in the wall. And perhaps you have felt this yourself. That strange feeling, like there is another person living inside you. A colder version, a darker version, a dangerous version. A version capable of things you would never admit aloud. Carl Jung believed every human being carries this hidden world inside them, but society teaches us to suppress it. From childhood, you were rewarded for being good. Be polite, be calm, be agreeable. Do not show anger. Do not question authority. Do not scare people with your truth. So slowly, you abandoned pieces of yourself, not because they disappeared, but because they became unacceptable. Your aggression became silence. Your sadness became humor. Your fear became perfectionism. Your loneliness became emotional distance. And eventually, you forgot who you truly were. This is the tragedy of modern people. They are disconnected from themselves. They live outwardly civilized lives while inwardly drowning in chaos. And the more disconnected a person becomes from their shadow, the more dangerous they become, because unconscious darkness controls behavior in ways people do not understand. The man who pretends to be morally pure often hides secret corruption. The person who constantly condemns others usually hates something inside themselves. The one obsessed with controlling people is often terrified of losing control internally. Human beings project their shadow onto the world. They attack in others what they cannot face within themselves. This is why hatred spreads so easily, because people would rather destroy others than confront themselves. Look carefully at society. Most people are not conscious. They are reactive, emotionally impulsive, controlled by invisible wounds, controlled by ego, controlled by hidden insecurity. And the frightening part is, many of them believe they are good people. But Jung understood something ancient philosophers understood long before modern psychology existed. A dangerous person is not someone who has darkness. A dangerous person is someone who believes they have none, because the person aware of their darkness can control it, but the person who denies it becomes possessed by it. This is why some of the cruelest individuals appear kind on the surface. Their shadow is unconscious, unexamined, hidden beneath morality and social performance. And when pressure arrives, the mask falls. History is filled with people who appeared civilized until circumstances revealed the monster beneath. Carl Jung saw this clearly after witnessing humanity descend into war and destruction. He realized evil was not rare, it was human, and every person carried the potential for both creation and destruction. This truth terrifies people because humans want simple stories, good people, bad people, heroes, villains. Reality is darker. The same person capable of love is capable of cruelty. The same mind capable of compassion can become merciless under fear. And perhaps this is why so many people spend their lives distracting themselves. Noise, entertainment, addiction, endless stimulation. Because silence forces confrontation. And deep down, most people are terrified of meeting themselves, especially at night, when the world becomes quiet, when the distractions fade, when unresolved emotions begin crawling from the unconscious. That emptiness you feel sometimes, that strange heaviness, may not be depression alone. It may be the shadow demanding recognition, not to destroy you, but to make you whole. Because Jung did not believe the goal was to eliminate darkness. That is impossible. The goal was integration, to face your darkness consciously, to understand it, to master it, to transform it into strength. This is where Stoic philosophy becomes deeply connected to Jung's warning. The Stoics never taught emotional suppression. They taught awareness, control, discipline. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." But how can you control your mind if you refuse to look inside it? Most people are slaves to emotions they do not understand. A man thinks he is angry at the world. In reality, he hates his own weakness. A woman thinks she is emotionally detached because she is independent. In reality, she is terrified of abandonment. People rarely know the true reasons behind their behavior because the unconscious mind hides uncomfortable truths and the ego protects itself at all costs. This is why self-awareness is painful. Real self-awareness destroys illusions. It forces you to confront uncomfortable realities. You are not always kind, not always honest, not always strong, not always innocent. There are parts of you capable of manipulation, capable of jealousy, capable of destruction. But here's the paradox Jung discovered. The moment you acknowledge your darkness, it begins losing control over you. Because awareness creates separation. You stop being possessed by emotion. You begin observing it, mastering it, directing it. That is real power. Not pretending to be harmless, but becoming dangerous and choosing discipline. There's a reason ancient warriors valued self-control above aggression. An undisciplined man is weak, even if he appears powerful, because anyone can react emotionally, anyone can lose control, anyone can explode. But mastery requires awareness. The strongest people in history were not emotionless. They simply understood themselves deeply enough to remain calm in chaos. That calmness is not weakness, it is controlled darkness. And society misunderstands this completely. People trust harmlessness, but harmlessness is not virtue. A rabbit is harmless. That does not make it morally superior. True virtue is having power and controlling it consciously. Jung believed every human being must eventually confront their shadow or become consumed by it unconsciously. And life has a way of forcing this confrontation, usually through suffering, heartbreak, betrayal, loss, failure, humiliation. Because pain strips away illusion. Pain reveals character. A comfortable person can pretend forever, but suffering exposes truth. Who are you when life breaks your pride? Who are you when nobody admires you? Who are you when the world stops rewarding you? That is where the shadow appears. And most people panic when they meet it. They see anger they never admitted, neediness they denied, fear they buried. And instead of integrating it, they run into addiction, into relationships, into distractions, into fake positivity. But the shadow always follows, because you cannot escape yourself.
This is why emotionally intelligent people often become more silent with age, not because they have nothing to say, but because they understand human nature more deeply. They understand how fragile the ego is, how wounded people are, how much of society is built on performance. The older and wiser a person becomes, the more they realize most human behavior is unconscious. People do not always lie intentionally. Sometimes they genuinely believe their own illusions. That is the terrifying brilliance of the mind. It can hide truth even from itself. And this is why Jung's warning matters more today than ever before. Modern society encourages external identity, but discourages inner confrontation. People obsess over appearance, status, validation, attention, but remain strangers to themselves. A person can spend years building a perfect image while internally collapsing, and eventually the unconscious rebels. Suddenly, the successful man feels empty. Suddenly, the admired woman feels numb. Suddenly, the confident person develops anxiety because the soul cannot survive endless self-betrayal. The shadow eventually demands truth. This is why some people secretly admire villains in movies and literature, not because they love evil, but because villains often express the hidden emotions society suppresses: power, revenge, freedom, dominance, chaos. The shadow recognizes itself, and if unconscious, it becomes seductive. This is why suppressed darkness becomes dangerous. What you refuse to control eventually controls you. But Jung offered something deeper than fear. He offered transformation, because hidden within the shadow is also your strength, your courage, your ambition, your creativity, your intensity. Many people suppress not only darkness, but power. They become smaller to remain accepted. They silence their voice, hide their intelligence, suppress their ambition, because standing out invites judgment. So they slowly betray themselves for comfort, and years later they wonder why they feel empty, because the soul knows when it has been abandoned. Jung believed becoming whole required individuation, the process of becoming your true self, not the socially approved self, the real self, the integrated self, the conscious self. This process is painful because awakening always is. To awaken psychologically means realizing you are responsible for your mind, your reactions, your discipline, your choices. No one is coming to save you, and this realization terrifies weak minds. Weak minds want comfort, excuses, distraction, blame, but strong minds seek truth, even when truth hurts, especially when truth hurts, because pain can become transformation. The Stoics understood this deeply. They trained themselves to face discomfort willingly, cold, loss, humiliation, uncertainty.
Not because they enjoyed suffering, but because suffering reveals mastery. Anyone can feel strong when life is easy, but chaos reveals the architecture of the soul. And perhaps this is why some people become wiser after pain, while others become bitter. One confronts the shadow consciously, the other becomes consumed by it unconsciously. Bitterness is unresolved pain. Wisdom is transformed pain. There is a difference, and you can see it in people's eyes. Some carry darkness that poisoned them. Others carry darkness they mastered. One becomes destructive, the other becomes powerful. This is why disciplined people often seem emotionally calm, not because they lack emotion, but because they have wrestled with themselves privately. The greatest battles happen internally, against impulse, against fear, against ego, against self-deception. And most people lose these battles because they refuse awareness. Awareness is exhausting. It demands honesty, brutal honesty. You must observe your envy without justification, observe your arrogance without denial, observe your weakness without self-pity.
This level of self-confrontation is rare because the ego fears exposure. But without exposure, there is no transformation. This is why Jung believed depression sometimes emerges when a person refuses necessary growth. The psyche rebels, the unconscious demands evolution, and what people call a crisis may actually be the death of illusion, the destruction of a false self. But destruction is frightening, especially when your identity was built upon approval. Society rewards masks, but the soul suffocates beneath them, and eventually you reach a moment where pretending becomes more painful than truth. That is the beginning of awakening. Not happiness, not peace, awakening. An awakening is uncomfortable because suddenly you see people differently. You notice manipulation, projection, insecurity, emotional hunger. You realize how much behavior is driven by fear. Fear of rejection, fear of insignificance, fear of loneliness, fear of death. Most people are not evil, they are unconscious, and unconscious people create suffering without realizing it. This realization changes how you move through life. You become less reactive, less naive, less emotionally dependent. You stop expecting the world to be fair. And strangely, that makes you stronger, because emotional resilience is born when illusion dies. This is what Jung wanted people to understand. The shadow is not your enemy. Unconsciousness is. The goal is not perfection. Perfection is impossible. The goal is consciousness, to know yourself deeply enough that your darkness serves wisdom instead of destruction, that your anger becomes discipline, your pain becomes insight, your fear becomes awareness, your suffering becomes strength. This is the transformation weak people avoid, because transformation requires sacrifice. You must sacrifice illusion, victimhood, false identity, emotional dependency. You must stop lying to yourself. And perhaps this is the hardest battle a human being can fight, not against the world, but against self-deception. Because lies feel safe, truth changes everything. Truth demands action, responsibility, discipline, growth. And once you truly see yourself, you can never fully return to unconsciousness again. This is why awakened people often feel isolated, not superior, isolated. Because once you begin understanding human nature deeply, normal conversations feel empty, shallow distractions lose meaning. You start craving truth more than comfort, and truth is lonely. But there is power in this loneliness, because solitude teaches self-reliance. It teaches observation, clarity, inner strength. The world fears solitude because solitude removes distraction, and distraction protects the ego. But in silence, the mind reveals itself. This is why many people cannot sit alone quietly for long. The unconscious becomes too loud. Regret, fear, shame, loneliness, all waiting beneath the surface. But if you stay long enough, something changes. You stop running, you stop resisting, and eventually you meet yourself honestly. Not the performance, not the mask, the real self. Broken perhaps, flawed certainly, but real. And there is something powerful about truth, even painful truth, because truth ends inner war. The moment you stop pretending, you begin healing. This does not mean life becomes easy. It means you become stronger, more conscious, more disciplined, more resilient. You stop seeking constant validation. You stop fearing rejection. You stop collapsing emotionally every time life becomes difficult. Because you understand something most people never do. Suffering is inevitable, but unconscious suffering destroys people. Conscious suffering transforms them. That is the difference. And perhaps this is Jung's greatest warning of all. If you refuse to face your darkness voluntarily, life will force you to face it violently, through breakdown, through heartbreak, through collapse. The shadow always demands acknowledgement, always. So the question is not whether you have darkness. Everyone does. The question is, will you control it consciously, or will it control you unconsciously? Because inside every human being, there is both a monster and a sage, both chaos and wisdom, both destruction and discipline. And maturity begins the moment you stop pretending otherwise. Carl Jung understood this. The Stoics understood this. Ancient warriors understood this. The strongest humans are not those without darkness. They are those who walked into it consciously and returned with wisdom. So tonight, when the world becomes quiet, ask yourself honestly, what part of yourself have you been hiding? What emotion have you buried? What truth have you avoided? Because the life you want may exist behind the part of yourself you fear most. And perhaps the shadow was never there to destroy you. Perhaps it was there to awaken you.